Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today, we're going deep on missionary support raising. I'm really curious to unpack this. It's not something most people think a lot about, but it's super important to how missions work, right?
Yeah, it really is. We'll be looking at not just the mechanics of how missionaries get funded, but also, the challenges they face and even some of the creative strategies they're using.
Okay, so it's more than just like passing the plate.
Oh, way more. It's a lot about relationships. It's about crafting compelling stories and adapting to the changing world of fundraising. It's really dynamic.
That makes sense. The articles you said all really emphasize relationships. Like, it's about connecting with people who really buy into what the missionary is trying to do.
Exactly. It's not just about asking for money, but inviting others to be part of something much bigger than themselves. And these connections, they really run the gamut. We're talking churches, individual donors, you've got online platforms these days, even missionary agencies. They all play a role.
Okay, so spreading the support out like that, it's almost like a safety net, would you say?
Yeah, you got it. Think of it like building a house. You don't want to build a house on just one pillar, right? A diversified network helps missionaries weather the storms and make sure they can keep doing what they're doing long term.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of methods, the articles do get into some really specific approaches. Partnering with churches seems like the natural starting point. Is that where most missionaries would begin?
Churches are definitely, yeah, they're like a cornerstone. They often contribute financially, but they also offer prayer and they can even mobilize their congregations to get involved. A lot of times missionaries will present their goals to pastors, directly and keep them updated on their progress.
Okay, so aligning the goals with the church's existing vision is probably pretty key there. But what happens when a missionary's work doesn't perfectly match up with what a church prioritizes? How do they navigate that?
That's a great question. It is definitely ideal when there's perfect alignment, but it's not always the case. In those situations, missionaries have to highlight the common ground, emphasize the shared values, and present their work in a way that resonates with the church's mission, even if it's not a 100% match.
So finding those points of connection and building from there.
Exactly. And clear communication is key. The more clearly a missionary can articulate their vision and demonstrate how it aligns with the church's broader mission, the better their chances of securing support.
The articles also talk about engaging individual donors. It seems like that would require a more personal approach.
Absolutely. This is where storytelling becomes really powerful. Instead of just presenting facts and figures, missionaries need to connect with donors on a heart level, emotionally, sharing stories about their personal journey, the people they've met, and the impact they're making. That can be incredibly powerful.
One article highlighted the importance of specificity, like instead of saying we're helping children in need, tell a story about one specific child whose life has been changed. Is that the level of detail we're talking about?
Yes, exactly. People connect with stories and specific examples. Like imagine a missionary describing how their work helped a young girl access clean water for the first time, or how they provided medical care that saved a child's life. Those details, they paint a picture. They showed donors the impact.
It's about inviting them to be part of that picture, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about sharing, feel-good stories. It's also about being honest about the challenges, the setbacks, and the needs that still exist. Transparency builds trust, and donors are more likely to give generously when they feel like they're truly part of the journey, both the highs and the lows.
And now here's where it gets really interesting. The whole world of online platforms. Honestly, this wasn't something I would have thought was a big factor in missionary fundraising.
It's kind of become a game changer. Websites, social media, crowdfunding platforms, they've all become essential tools for missionaries to reach a global audience.
So they're not limited to just their local network anymore.
Not at all. These tools allow them to connect with people from all over the world, share updates in real time, and receive donations instantly through these secure online portals.
Okay, but with all these different options, how do missionaries decide which platforms are right for them? I mean, Give, Send, Go probably appeals to a different audience than Patreon, right?
You're absolutely right. Choosing the right platform depends on the audience. What are the missionaries' goals? What kind of content are they sharing? Give, Send, Go is very popular, for its Christian focus, while Patreon is really good for creators offering like regular updates and exclusive content. It's all about finding the right fit.
So they have to be strategic about where they're putting their time and energy.
Exactly. And also navigating, there's ethical considerations with online fundraising too, data privacy, transparency, and how funds are used, and avoiding overly sensationalized content. These are all things to think about.
Yeah, so it's like it's a whole world of possibilities, but with its own set of complexities.
Exactly. But, when they're used wisely, these online tools can be incredibly powerful for connecting with supporters and amplifying a missionary's impact.
That brings us to missionary agencies. Am I right in thinking that they provide a lot of the behind-the-scenes support?
Yeah, they do. Think of them as a support system. They offer things like financial handling, administrative resources, and even training on best practices for fundraising. For example, one agency that was mentioned in your research, Mission Quest, they equip missionaries with like donor management tools and they promote transparency in giving.
That makes sense. The articles also mentioned EKFA accreditation being important. Can you explain what that is and why donors would care?
Sure. So ECFA stands for the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. It's basically a seal of approval showing that an agency meets these strict financial standards and operates transparently. Donors want to know their money's being used responsibly, so ECFA accreditation gives them that assurance.
So it's like a third-party validation that says everything is legit.
Exactly. It really builds trust, which is so essential for fostering that long-term support.
Okay, so we've covered churches, we've talked about individual donors, online platforms, and agencies. That's a pretty diverse set of options. The articles also mention hosting events as a way to inspire support. How does that fit into the mix?
Events, yeah, they're fantastic for connecting with potential supporters, face to face. Think mission fairs, maybe speaking at a church, or even just dinners where missionaries can share their experiences firsthand. These types of events, they create a space for storytelling. People can ask questions and be inspired to get involved.
But isn't it a lot of work to put on an event? Especially for missionaries who are already juggling so much. Where do they find the time and the energy?
It definitely takes effort. That's where prioritization comes in, and thinking strategically. Missionaries might partner with churches or supporting organizations to help share the workload, and they really try to focus on events that, align with their target audience and their fundraising goals. It's about maximizing impact and not just, filling a calendar.
So choosing the right events, right partners, and making sure the message is going to resonate with whoever shows up.
Yeah, you got it. And it's not just about the event itself, it's about the follow-up, what happens after. Following up with attendees, nurturing those connections, and making it very clear how people can get involved. Those are crucial steps for turning attendees into supporters.
It sounds like the follow-up is just as important as the event itself. You can't just assume people are going to sign up, right? You really got to cultivate those relationships.
Exactly. It's about building a whole community of support, and events can be a great catalyst for that.
All this is really fascinating, but we got to talk about the elephant in the room, right? Missionary support raising can't always be easy.
You're right. There are definitely some hurdles along the way. In fact, some might say that navigating the challenges is where the real growth happens for the missionary and for their ministry.
I like that. Tell me more.
Well, imagine pouring your heart into sharing your mission and just, getting rejected. It's not just about the financial no, but it can feel like they're rejecting you, your calling, everything.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I mean, isn't resilience like part of the job description for a missionary, though?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where having a strong support system and good coping mechanisms is so important. It's not about, becoming immune to rejection, but learning how to reframe it, seeing it as part of the process.
So how do they actually do that? What kind of tools are we talking about?
Some keep a detailed record of their interactions. They'll note the outcomes, but also any feedback they get. When they look back at those records, then I see patterns or areas to improve. It turns rejection into a learning experience.
So they're turning those no's into data points.
Exactly. And it's important to celebrate the yeses, no matter how small they seem. Every person who decides to partner, that's a win. That's something to celebrate.
Yeah, got to find those little wins to keep your spirits up.
Exactly. And, connecting with other missionaries, people who get it, can be so helpful. Sharing experiences, offering encouragement, learning from each other's, successes and failures. It creates a real sense of community.
A support system for the support system, right?
You got it. And let's be real, balancing fundraising with actual mission work, that can be a recipe for burnout. Constantly asking for support can distract from the work itself, the work you feel called to do.
That makes sense. It's a tough balance for sure. But isn't managing your time effectively like part of being a missionary? I mean, where do we draw the line between legitimate concerns and personal accountability?
You're right. Responsibility is key, but it's also important to remember that missionaries are human. They need time for rest, time to reflect, even just processing the emotional toll of the work. Some agencies actually offer training on things like time management and self-care. It's about helping missionaries thrive, not just survive.
It's about sustainability for the mission and for the missionary, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of sustainability, let's talk about maintaining support over the long term. Getting that initial funding is one thing, but how do they keep it going year after year?
That's a great question. I bet donor fatigue is a real thing.
It definitely is. And that's why consistent and engaging communication is so important. Things like regular newsletters, personal updates, photos, and videos from the field, those all help supporters stay connected and really see the impact of what they're doing.
So it's about keeping them in the loop, making them feel like part of the journey.
Exactly. And it's important to tailor the communication to different people. Some donors might want detailed reports, while others might prefer short videos or social media posts. It's knowing your audience.
That sounds like a lot to manage. Are there any tools or strategies to make it easier?
There are, and many agencies provide, templates, training, access to platforms that can streamline things like communication and donor management. And of course, there's software and apps designed for newsletters, social media, all of that.
So working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And Missionaries' time is valuable, and it should be spent, focused on the mission itself as much as possible.
Right, and we can't forget about the added challenge of working across different cultures and languages. That has to add a whole other layer of complexity to communication, right?
It does. Imagine trying to connect with a donor from a totally different background who maybe even speaks a different language. It's so important for missionaries to be sensitive, humble, really trying to understand how communication works in different contexts.
So they can't just assume that everyone communicates the same way. They need to be adaptable, right?
Exactly. Sometimes a translator or cultural liaison can be really helpful. It's about respecting those differences, finding ways to bridge the gap.
Meeting people where they are, literally and figuratively, right?
Well said. And sometimes you got to get creative. I remember hearing about a missionary who used humor, to connect with donors from a culture that really values lightheartedness. He would share funny stories and observations. And it worked, it entertained people, but also helped bridge that cultural divide.
That's a great example. It shows you don't always have to stick to the traditional way of doing things.
Exactly. It's about finding authentic ways to connect, even when, cultural differences seem like a big obstacle.
So we've talked about relationships being at the core of support raising. We've explored different methods from churches to online platforms, and we've talked about the challenges, but there's one thing we haven't dived into fully: storytelling. Why is it so important for missionaries to be good storytellers?
Because stories have this power to transport you to another place, to help you feel what others feel, and that can inspire action.
So it's not just about facts and figures, but connecting on a deeper level.
Exactly. And for missionaries, crafting a compelling narrative that's essential for getting people on board, for getting them engaged, it's about inviting them into the story.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me how they do that. What makes a missionary story really compelling?
Authenticity is key. People can spot a fake from a mile away. Donors want to hear real stories, from the heart, not a sales pitch.
So it's about being genuine, letting your passion for the work shine through.
Exactly. And sharing your journey, how you got involved in this specific mission, the challenges, the lessons you've learned along the way.
Being vulnerable, letting people see the human side of it all.
Absolutely. And highlighting the impact, but not in a bragging way. It's about sharing stories of the people who have been impacted, the people whose lives have changed because of the work, that shows donors the difference they're making.
So instead of saying, "We built a school," tell the story of a child who can now go to school because of that school.
Yes, exactly. Make it personal, relatable, real, and don't be afraid to show the before and after.
What do you mean by that?
Well, share a story about a village struggling without clean water and then show them the joy on those faces when they have that new well. That contrast visually can be incredibly powerful. Donors get to see the results.
It's about showing them the transformation.
Exactly. And photos and videos, those are powerful too. Sometimes an image can say more than 1,000 words.
So don't just tell the story, show it.
Precisely. Those multimedia elements bring it to life, make it more memorable.
It's about creating an experience, not just giving them information.
You got it. And one last tip, be transparent about the money. Where is it going? Donors want to know.
Break down the costs. How much does it cost to build that well, provide medical supplies, things like that?
Yep, exactly. That kind of transparency, it builds trust and makes people feel like they're true partners.
Okay, so we've got the narrative, visuals, transparency with finances. What else can missionaries do to engage potential supporters?
The work isn't over once they get the initial support. They have to stay connected with their supporters, nurture those relationships, keep them engaged.
So it's an ongoing thing.
It is. And communication is key. Newsletters, updates through email or social media, even phone calls.
So don't disappear once you got the donation, right?
Right. And make it personal, handwritten thank you notes, emails tailored to specific people, sharing stories about how their support is making a difference. Little things like that mean a lot.
Showing that you appreciate them, making them feel valued.
Exactly. And don't forget the power of prayer requests. Let people know what to pray for. That makes them feel like they're really participating, even if they're far away.
Yeah, prayer is support too, even if it's not money.
Absolutely. And social media is a powerful tool for staying connected these days, too.
Like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Exactly. Those platforms are great for sharing real-time updates, photos, videos. They can even have conversations with their supporters.
It's like giving people a window into their work.
Exactly. And it allows for two-way communication. People can ask questions, offer encouragement. It really builds community.
It's about fostering that sense of shared purpose, right?
It really is. And one more thing, feedback loops. Encourage people to share their thoughts, ask questions, give suggestions on how you can communicate better.
So make them feel heard, like their opinion matters.
Yes, exactly. It shows that you value their input and that you're trying to connect with them in a way that works for them.
Okay, so we've covered consistent communication, social media, feedback loops. Anything else missionaries can do to strengthen those relationships?
Don't forget to celebrate together. When you hit a fundraising goal, when you finish a project, whenever you see a life transformed, share those victories.
It's about giving them a sense of ownership, like they're a part of the celebration.
Exactly. And it's okay to acknowledge the struggles too, be honest about the tough stuff, ask for prayers. It just deepens that connection.
It's about being real through thick and thin.
Exactly. Strong relationships are built on trust and authenticity. That goes for missionary support raising, just like everything else.
We've been focusing a lot on the individual missionaries' efforts. Before we wrap up this part, I want to circle back to missionary agencies. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they can help and how missionaries can make the most of that partnership?
Working with a reputable agency can be a game changer, especially when it comes to credibility. Donors are more likely to trust an organization with established financial practices.
So it's like they've already been vetted, their work is legitimate.
Exactly. And beyond that, agencies offer tons of resources and support, training on fundraising best practices, help with crafting presentations, and often, they already have an established network of donors.
It's like having a whole team of experts backing you up.
That's a great way to put it. And agencies often handle like the administrative stuff, processing donations, managing finances, making sure everything's legally and ethically sound. That frees up the missionary to focus on, the actual mission work.
So less paperwork, more doing what they're passionate about.
Exactly. But, to really make the most of that partnership, communication is key. Missionaries need to keep their agency informed about, what's going well, what's not going well, all of it.
So it's a two-way street, a real partnership.
Yep. And missionaries should really take advantage of the resources that their agency offers, workshops, fundraising tools, mentorship. It's all there for them.
Don't be shy about asking for help, right?
Right. And finally, showcase that partnership. Mention the agency on your website and your social media when you're talking to donors.
So leverage that agency's reputation to bolster your message.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
This has been such a fascinating look into the world of missionary support raising. We've talked about methods, challenges, how the whole landscape is changing, and the power of stories. As we move into the last part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the spiritual side of things. How does faith play into raising support for missions?
That's a great question. For a lot of missionaries, support raising is more than just a practical necessity. It's an act of faith. It's about trusting that God will provide and inviting others to be part of that.
So it's not just a job, it's a calling.
Exactly. And there are so many examples in the Bible that show how important partnership and support are in ministry. Our sources even referenced Luke 8:3, where it talks about women who supported Jesus and his disciples financially. It shows that supporting each other has always been part of spreading the gospel.
We all have a role to play, whether it's through prayer, giving, or practical support.
Absolutely. And for those missionaries facing the tough stuff, the challenges of fundraising, there's a verse in 2 Timothy that offers some encouragement. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. That verse reminds them to lean on God, to trust in his guidance.
It's a reminder that they're not in this alone. They've got God and they've got people who believe in their mission.
And that leads to the heart of it all. Community. Missionary support raising, when it's done well, it's a collaborative thing, a partnership between the missionary and everyone who believes in their vision.
It's about being part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And it's about generosity, generosity in giving and generosity in receiving. Because when we support missions, we're not just contributing to the work being done, we're enriching our own lives and our own faith.
That's a great thought to keep in mind as we go into the last part of our dive. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the practical stuff like how to actually raise funds to the spiritual side of partnership and all that.
It's been great. What strikes me is how much missionary support raising reflects these bigger trends we're seeing in philanthropy overall.
Really? That's interesting. What do you mean?
Well, we're seeing a shift away from those like traditional one-time donations and more toward this relational approach. People want to be more than just donors. They want to be partners to be involved in the causes they support.
So it's not just about giving money, but really investing in something you believe in.
Exactly. And we see that reflected in how missionaries approach support raising. Now they're building relationships, sharing their stories, creating ways for supporters to really be a part of the mission.
Fostering that sense of ownership, right?
Precisely. And technology has been huge in making this shift happen. Online platforms have made it so much easier to connect with the causes you care about, donate in a way that works for you, and see how your support is making an impact.
Yeah, so it's like opening up giving to everyone, giving people more ways to get involved.
Exactly. And that's exciting, right? It means missions aren't just for the people who can physically go to the field anymore. Anyone with an internet connection can be a part of it.
And that brings us to the listener. So if someone's hearing all of this and thinking, okay, this is cool, but what does it mean for me? What's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing to remember is that supporting missions, it's not just about money, it's about partnership. It's about realizing we're all part of this global community, and each of us has a role to play.
We're all connected.
Exactly. What happens on the mission field affects us all, even if we don't see it directly.
So for the person listening who's feeling inspired, what are some practical things they can do to get involved?
Well, the first thing is prayer. Prayer for those missionaries, for their safety, their work, their families. Prayer is powerful, and anyone can do it.
It's a way to connect with the work, even from afar.
Exactly. Then think about how your own talents, your skills, can be used to help. Maybe you're a great writer and can help a missionary tell their story. Or maybe you're good with social media and can help them reach more people.
So think outside the box. Use your gifts.
Exactly. And of course, financial support is always needed. Even small, regular donations add up over time.
Find a level that works for you and stick with it.
Right. And don't be afraid to reach out to missionaries or organizations that resonate with you. Ask questions, learn more about what they do, see how you can get involved.
It's about taking that first step.
Yes. And remember, even the smallest act of support can make a difference.
That's what partnership is all about, right? We all have something to offer, and when we work together, we can do amazing things.
It's been wonderful exploring this with you today. I hope this deep dive has been informative and inspiring for our listeners.
I think it has. And to everyone listening, remember, your support matters, your prayers matter, your actions matter. Together, we can make a difference.
Until next time, keep diving deep and exploring the possibilities.